Hey, boys and girls and idiots named Gerstreams. Weather report for November 11th, 2021.
This is how I picture gross streams in real life.
Yeah.
Except maybe with a like a green John Deere hat on instead of a halo.
Yeah, there you go. Okay, so I badly chose an icon for today's show. I stole some art off the internet just randomly. I did not want to spend 3 hours of my fucking life editing out the me part, right? I'm not a weak atheist. I consider myself a strong atheist.
He's just a bad graphic artist.
Right. And it's somebody else's blog, and I linked his blog, and he explains why he's a weak atheist. And we all know, because of the Rageous stream, that Gerstreams is the weakest of all atheists because he allows all kinds of bullshit. Speaking of which, midnight. I'm not going to bring that up. Midnight. I should send him a link. Maybe he can come explain himself. I don't know. Anyway, we're not going to talk about that. Okay?
Let's not talk about that.
Let's not talk about that.
I'm striking it from my agenda.
We're not going to talk about Emery Moore. ... until tomorrow. ... If you were to think of a way to mutate Emery Moyna's name to Emery Moore anything, please, I would like you guys to vote on what I should add to Emery Morn ... What should we call Emery Morn? I'm not going to say it, Scott.
Okay, don't say it. Don't say it.
You told me not to say it.
Yeah, that's just, you just don't want to go off and say
it. You forbade me to say it. Okay, maybe we'll get some votes from Chad about, what we can call them. Anyway, let's see. Weather report. What are we doing? Is atheism a new faith? We're going to play a video and listen to this guy's thoughts. There was one point in here where I got really mad at him, and then I started to like him again, and see if you can figure out when all that is.
Now, are you wanting to play the whole thing? Because if we just want to play the new faith part, we could do that. It's up to you.
Well, is atheism a new faith? Yeah, it's only 6 minutes.
Okay, we're going to do the whole thing.
Should I speed it up?
No, well, it's up to you, man.
The guy's got a good voice. I don't know. We'll see what happens. Maybe we'll get tired. Okay. Wow. Okay. It's linked in the description.
But I'm not an atheist for the obvious reasons. The obvious reasons, for example, that religion has brought much woe upon the world. I'm not too sure if you ran the tape twice, whether the world history will be better with or without religion. The other obvious but poor reason for being atheist is that there is no evidence of the existence of God. And actually, it's not clear what evidence would consist of. For some people, just the fact that the world makes sense, or that there's something rather than nothing is sufficient evidence of God. So these are not my reasons for being an atheist. Nor am I an atheist because I've thought that the church has opposed science. There are certain emblematic moments, of course, when it has opposed science, Galileo and all that. But you could argue, as Whitehead's done, that monotheism really is a precursor of our sense of the world being governed by laws. So all of those...
Danikins?
Yeah, that was interesting.
Yeah, that's interesting. I wonder what our side chat people and the people here on the panel think about that.
Yeah.
That monotheism was just humanity, or at least a segment of humanity, coming to deal with the fact that there are natural laws at play in the world.
Yeah, humanity's first attempt at science, and they came up with, theism. or basically, which is interesting. But it one has to wonder why they still think that way, right?
That's almost like saying, if we came from monkeys, how come there's still monkeys?
Yeah.
It's that ideas are out there and they stay out there, and people who adopt new and different ideas, just because they do, doesn't mean that it's going to cancel out all the old ideas from another group of people.
Yeah. One other point of contention here is that he said that the church does not push back on science, but I think they do when it comes to young Earth creationists. I mean, they're trying to erase science, basically.
True. However, just to get a sense of proportion on the creationism aspect of it. I guess one way they might push back is like if they're a theistic evolutionist and they believe in God, but then they're still accepting science.
Yeah.
So I think it's just that small percent of
30%.
48. Well, yeah, that's in America. You got to think globally.
Yeah, okay.
But anyway, I see what you mean, and I'm sympathetic towards it. But I think what he's saying is sound. Although I would like to see more actual historical backing for the statement that it's the first attempt to come to the grips with the fact that we have laws in nature.
Yep. Okay, play it.
Are not the reasons why I am an atheist. My main reason for being an atheist is that the concept of God is totally illogical.
Yes.
Any attempt to bring together all the qualities that are ascribed to God lead to contradictions. God, for example, is separate from his creation, but is also infinite and boundless. Contradiction number one. There's the obvious contradiction that people have often talked about, is that he is both omnipotent and all good, and yet allows a world in which terrible and appalling things happen. Whatever way you square it, the concept of God is a logical impossibility, and that's acknowledged in some religions. The notion of the apophatic God, the God of whom it is incorrect to ascribe any positive qualities. So I suppose my atheism is not far from an apophatic God, except it doesn't add the little God bit.
Okay, I want to, let's see, that is apophatic God.
Yeah.
apophatic. That is the idea that you can't, you define God in negative terms. You can't say anything about God, or you can't describe God.
Yeah, you can say what God is not, but you really can't say what God is.
And that is very, very close to naturalism when you think about it. It's a bridge. That is the bridge over troubled water. When if they were to have a conception of God that is beyond anything that we can comprehend, okay, then they're kind of pointing at the physical universe or cosmos that created what we have here, because we have not been able to comprehend that yet, right? So they're kind of pointing at the same thing. So if you don't have any dogma or any qualities or any kind of dogmatic belief about God and everything is defined in negative terms, you're basically talking about naturalism, I think. You follow that?
I follow.
Okay. I'm glad you follow.
And as far as I'm concerned, I can't find house room for a logical contradiction. You know, to keep it open as a placeholder doesn't seem to me to be a useful use of my mind. Doesn't mean to say that I in any way restrict the sense of possibility in the world. The only possibilities that I do rule out are those such as a logical contradiction of the idea of God.
To begin with, you're an odd atheist. I don't mean that in any terribly derogatory way. I might even make that in a complimentary way.
I feel the warmth of it, even as you speak. Yes.
In that you believe that the world cannot be described in materialistic or entirely physicalistic terms, whether it's
okay, that's where I started hating him.
Yeah.
Consciousness or nature of time or the nature of the creation of the universe or these big topics, you would not go immediately into the physicalist approach, which virtually every atheist does. So do you feel yourself odd?
I think I probably am, in the same way as I'm anti-naturalist. I don't believe that we can be understood simply as animals, or indeed as
hate them more.
part of the material world. There's been typically a clustering of being materialist and being an atheist on the one hand, and being a dualist or whatever, and having spiritual beliefs. My own feeling is there are two sorts of errors that are currently available. One is the belief that the world has a supernatural origin and is pervaded by supernatural forces, and the other, it is be understood in entirely naturalistic terms, in particular materialistic terms. I think both of those are wrong. What I don't know is what's right.
Well,
Okay, what do you think he's talking about in materialistic terms? I think he has a limited idea of what physicalism is.
Well,
Or
you know,
if
there's
he's-
he has a lot of videos on YouTube, and I'm looking forward to maybe going through a few of them to see if I can find out really what his position is. But he's saying I'm not a dualist, and I'm not a materialist, whatever he defines materialism to be, and I don't know that yet.
Yeah, they're like when I grew up, when I was a young man, materialism had an entirely different sense to it, right? And there was a lot of pushback against materialism, as you know, there's only material, but then, oh God, you know, all of a sudden we discovered all this weird physics and wild dynamical systems and biology, and materialism didn't cover any of that. But it was more of a what I would call a straw man view of what physicalism is. And I don't share that straw man view of what physicalism is. That, you know, it's just materials bumping into each other, that sort of thing, that we could describe it that way. Anyway.
Did he say he was not a dualist?
He's not.
I thought he said he was.
He said he's not. Okay,
He's not.
Listen to the part where I started
He's
to
got an
like-
accent, so when somebody has, sometimes I have a hard time understanding.
I'll slow this
accents.
down. I'm going to slow this down.
I thought he said he was.
Yeah, here's the part where I start to like him again. And I was texting Scott and said, I hate this guy. No, I love him again.
what seems to be the common perception is the two views you described of the world seem to be universally exhausted. The view that everything is physical and the view that there is an existence of things not physical. Because if you say physical and not physical, that would seem to subsume everything.
It would, as a matter of logical, P and not, you know, it's either P or not P, isn't it? It's either raining or it's not raining. And so I agree with you on that. But I'm not too sure that's a good way of framing, as it were, the question of what kind of stuff is out there. I mean, clearly, I'm certainly not a materialist. I'm not a dualist. You know, you can call me a racist, imperialist, fascist, and I'll take it on the chin, but call me a dualist and I'll lose my temper.
I loved him again when he said that.
That's better. Yeah. Because I actually watched this prior to this, and I had it sped up. And when you have it sped up, you can't really understand them as good as you can if you run it at regular speed. Yeah. So that was clear. Yeah.
Oh, okay. Yeah, he made that clear.
Then that's the case. And nor am I a panpsychist. I don't think mind is distributed throughout the universe, because that doesn't help me to distinguish between a pebble and a sword. You know, if it's evenly distributed everywhere, then...
So you bankrupt all systems of thinking current.
I mean, if I'm an atheist in religious belief, I'm an ontological agnostic, which is to say, I really genuinely don't know what the fundamental stuff of the world is, whether there is one fundamental stuff, several types of stuff. Every account of the kinds of stuff there are seems to run into one kind of problem or another.
Yeah, I certainly agree that every possible explanation for what we have and what we are is ridiculous. I cannot think of one that is not ridiculous, but ultimately one is right.
Or none of them may be right, and there may be some other way of thinking about things. And I think we won't even start developing that way of thinking about things so long as we get stuck in saying we've got to choose between materialism.
There was a professor I had when I was in seminary that talked about epistemic humility. And I think Dr. Tallis showed it here. My professor at that time said something. He says, at worst, I'm wrong. At best, I'm incomplete. And so, in other words, it's not bad to be wrong about something. It's okay to say, I don't know. I'm still learning. And, you know, nobody knows, and we're going to figure it out. And that's epistemic humility. And I think that's a good quality.
Yeah, another name for that is weak.
I'm weak. Yeah, I'm weak. I'm vulnerable and weak.
Weak atheist.
That's that soy milk.
You're pretty weak. Okay. Yeah. A little humility. Yeah. I guess I have that when it comes to understanding how the universe came to be, or why there's something other than nothing. We're always going to be weak on that one. But anyway, or epistemically incomplete.
Dualism, panpsychism, and so on, idealism or whatever.
All right. When you look at what's happening in the debate of the world, atheism has become very militant and very aggressive in its approach to religion. How do you view that? Because many in the theological communities would say that atheism is its own faith. There is no fundamental difference between starting with no God and starting with God, that each one is a faith kind of position.
I think it's unfair.
Okay, now this, I think, is the reason why yesterday, right, just seconds before we shot it in the head, Daniel Bennett, a persistent young Earth creationist who sometimes inhabits our side chat, he plops a link to this video here, and I think this is the point or the issue he had in mind when he put it here.
Yes, so you're right.
With that in mind, let's continue to play this.
Yep.
And at the end of this, never mind, just play it.
Okay.
To speak of atheists as militant in the way that some fundamentalist religious believers have been militant. As far as I know, there isn't any commitment of atheism to torturing people for their belief. I can't remember when there was the last confessional war that was launched by atheists that has led to great loss of life. So the militance is their militance of words. And fair enough, they give it out, but my God, they get it back as well. So that's, it's not a militance of fists. And I think one's entitled to express one's views robustly. And if at times it means taking no prisoners, verbally that is, or in terms of argument, that's fine. We sometimes have to fight hard to assert our truths against the background noise of untruth.
Okay,
very
so
good.
Here's my question.
Good point.
Do you think Mr. Bennett listened to this video?
I think he listened to it with a complete set of different ears or a different brain absorbing that. I would maybe a better way to describe it. Right.
Yeah.
I mean, he clearly heard something different than what we're hearing.
Right.
Or interpreted it differently, clearly.
So I'm thinking he read the title and made a whole lot of assumptions.
Yeah. He may not even watch it. You would think he would have watched it, but wasn't that long of a video. So yeah.
But we do want to thank him for finding it for us and bringing it to us.
It's a darn fine video, I think. And
fine video.
Worst or best case scenario, welcome to the atheist community, Mr. Bennett.
And top dog, thank you. I'm changing the damn show icon right now. So there's no more misunderstandings.
Top dog to the rescue.
Did you go and edit that yourself?
What?
That thumbnail, or did you find one without the me?
Oh, I just search belief bubble.
Oh, okay. Okay.
It was one of them.
Okay. Thanks for finding that. Okay, fixed it. Now we don't have to talk about it no more. Okay. So what's next, guys? What's next? What are we doing? Oh, we're going to look at a little more of this Raymond Tallis.
Yeah, I've never encountered him before. Maybe way in the past or something. But there's another one about.
This one is where I kind of disagree with him on providing ultimate answers. I think he makes the point. Well, we'll play it and see.
Hey, maybe speaking of ultimate, the man who put ultimate and ultimatum is in the side chat. Do you want to send Jason Torn a link and maybe he can?
He already has one.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Well, come on in, Jason.
Well, I think he's weak. That's why he's not coming in.
He's too weak to come in. Did you do something to scare him off?
He's too weak to come in. I don't.
There he is.
There he is.
Well, Jason, first question is what did you think of did you listen to any of the first part of the Raymond Tallis stuff that we just played?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, I listened to it briefly, like I was working in the background. Yeah, I mean, I don't fully agree with everything he's saying because obviously I'm not a dualist. I know he said he's not a dualist, but it sounds like he is a dualist.
No, he isn't really. He isn't. He's just
he's saying there's something more than the brain, correct?
no, not at all.
So?
He's saying there's something more to understanding the universe than what we are currently capable of understanding. And he's claiming that a purely physicalist language couldn't describe it. And I think that is where he and I differ, because I think he's limiting physicalism to like the idea of materialism or something. But no, he's definitely not saying about that. In fact, did you hear the part where he said, if you call me dualist, you can call me a racist or anything else, but if you call me a dualist, I really get pissed off. So okay. Definitely not a dualist.
Well, now that Jason brings it up, it could be he's been called a dualist enough to where he wants to mention that he'll be pissed off if you call him a dualist. So maybe he has a position that at least others mistake for dualism. So I'll just have to maybe read something of his and see where he comes out.
Well, he might clear it up in this next video if we play a little bit. So let's give him another 6 minutes, should we?
Y'all willing to do that? Yay, let's do it.
And having studied neuroscience, been a doctor for many decades, worked in neurology with patients, a great writer, philosopher, appreciating art and aesthetics. When you look at science, how much of ultimate truth can science ultimately get to? Not where we are today, but ultimately, what are the limits of science?
Yeah. I mean, I'm going to preface my remarks by saying I think science is the greatest intellectual monument of humanity. I think it's probably it's probably our greatest cultural achievement collectively. Having said that, I think there are limits that are always going to be present. First of all, science cannot dig beneath itself to explain why there is such a thing as knowledge, and more generally, why there is such a thing as consciousness. In other words, it cannot actually find its own foundations.
Yeah, so he's kind of a Mysterian, is what you'd call him, in that he's thinking we're never going to be able to come up with a scientific explanation of consciousness that's going to intuitively satisfy us, right?
And knowledge as well. He included,
yeah, that was.
We don't know why there is knowledge or what knowledge is or something.
I really wish he hadn't said that, because he lost a few notches with me when he said knowledge. But the part about Mysterianism, I can understand that sentiment that people.
Godspeed, you're so judgmental.
Oh, shit, Gary. My new iPhone is really loud. Really loud.
That's why I turned mine off.
Okay, I'm going to play this. I got to take this call.
Okay.
Secondly, its whole approach is third person, objective, quantitative.
Hello.
And therefore, there will invariably slip through its grasp the immediate first-person experiences that lie at the center of our lives. And thirdly, I think it will always fail in relation to the fundamental metaphysical questions, most notably why there is something rather than nothing. The current attempts by M theory and all that sort of stuff to explain why there's something rather than nothing seem to me rather like Tommy Cooper with his conjuring tricks, just like that, And I don't think I'm persuaded that they have anything like an explanation, nor will we ever arrive at an explanation. Science stands on the assumption that there is something and then moves on.
Okay, let's examine some of those. In terms of the first person versus the third person, many scientists would say that that's our contribution to eliminate the first person, because the first person is deceptive. Some would say it's even illusion. Some would want to eliminate it because it distorts our understanding, that only when you deal in the third person can you really approach objective truth.
Well, so he's by definition true.
Talking about eliminativism there, which would be the Churchlands, where they said, we just have to get rid of that way of talking about things, the first person way, and he's going to push back on that. So,
I mean, objective truth is going to be third person, The question is whether objective truth is the sum total of truth.
Yes.
And my own feeling is there is subjective truth as well. For example, my experience of lying on a beach on a warm day is a reality that cannot be, as it were, dismissed as an illusion by science, even though we know that warmth boils down to atoms jigging up and down in certain ways. And my experience of the warmth boils down, possibly, according to some people, of sodium ions going through semi-permeable membranes up my neurons and so on and so forth. There's no way you can say I'm not experiencing, this experience is an illusion.
Okay, but that experience has to be expressed, and it's expressed, and we can describe all of your feelings in terms of physical activities. We can't do it today, all of it, to do it, but eventually we can. I mean, that's the argument, that the first person is not a reflection of reality. It's something that is like the foam on top of the waters. It's floating on top of the reality, but it's not the substance beneath it. And ultimately, we can explain it in terms of the third person objective reality.
Well, let's look at the kind of things that Galileo and after him Locke set aside as it were, so-called secondary qualities that seemed ontologically a bit shabby compared to the kind of things that science, quantitative science, looks like color, like the sense of warmth, like smell, and so on. It seems to me one will never, ever get to the position of demonstrating that those really aren't what they are. Of course, we may find reasons for them, we may find some underlying mechanisms by which they may be brought about, but in the end, the phenomena cannot be dismissed.
Okay, so I think what we're saying is that all of these can be subsumed under the general concept of subjectivity or consciousness or mind. So I think that's one category that we're saying that science, you're saying that science won't have total access to.
More broadly, the phenomenal world.
Okay, the phenomenal world, very good. Let's try to explore something else. Why is there something rather than nothing? The physics theories today would show how something comes from nothing, but the problem is there nothing is the laws of physics. So you have quantum fluctuations, and in a nothing that has quantum fluctuations, you can have a universe pop into existence. Now, how that works may or may not be true, but in any event, the most fundamental of the scientists still have to have those laws of physics. So I think the second area that we're saying that physics and science cannot get to, because they have to start with some fundamental laws.
Indeed, they have to start with some fundamental stuff. I mean, I think that their position is worse than you've described. I mean, what is the quantum fluctuations in a vacuum? Is it fluctuations of nothing? How can nothing fluctuate? In what way does it fluctuate? They can describe it mathematically, of course, but actually the notion of nothing fluctuating is a notion that we mustn't allow to go by on the nod. And also the idea that actually creation didn't cost anything because there was as much antimatter as matter was produced. So the net productivity was, you get 2 free lunches which are in opposite directions out of nothing. I can't believe that anybody entertains that for more than the life expectancy of a pi muon. It is so ridiculous that suddenly a negative and a positive come out of nothing, that it differentiates itself into 2 opposite kinds of material, and that's how you get your big free lunch.
So we have the phenomenal world, and we have the existence of the physical universe as 2 things that are outside the purview of science. Is there anything else?
That's big enough. It always reminds me of a character in Beckett who says there's 2 things you couldn't stand. One was the earth and the other was the heavens. But otherwise, you're feeling easy about it. It seems to me that excludes quite a lot.
Yes, it does.
The phenomenal world, first-person being,
yes,
on the one hand, and, as it were, those things that are a proper study, perhaps, of theology or metaphysics on the other. Yeah. So these I'm happy then, within that, for a science, there's a third thing, of course, which probably comes from the phenomenal world, is secondary, which is that of values. I mean, clearly, science can tell you how to get to a particular goal, but not tell you whether it's a good goal or an appropriate one. It's a fantastic vehicle for taking you from your intentions to their realization, but it doesn't tell you whether those are good intentions or indeed why you ever intended to do those things.
Okay. Interesting person, but I think he's given up too soon. So what is up with StreamYard that all of a sudden now when you show a comment, they fade it in slowly? It's so that you really can't tell that you've shown the comment. But anyway, Albert Hall. How many holes does it take to fill Albert Hall? Fish head salad. Pop that one up.
I'll be honest. I didn't understand half the shit that guy was saying.
Yeah, well, he's saying that basically the first person experience is never going to be rendered in terms that we can get a good intuitive feel from the physical description. And that's the problem that we were talking about the other day when I was trying to explain my particular theory of consciousness, is that what we're looking for an intuition that is more than saying, oh, it's just neurons, because that isn't going to cut it, right? Just neurons aren't going to explain to you why you feel a warm sun on you on a summer day on the beach, right? So what we're looking for is an intuition of consciousness, or an explanation of consciousness. And one of the big what is it? What do they call that thing? The Ark of the Covenant or something? Or what is the thing they were looking for in the Monty Python movie? The
Holy Grail.
The Holy Grail.
Ark of the Covenant is Indiana Jones.
Okay. The Holy Grail of neuroscience is the neural correlate of consciousness, right? And they've been hunting for that for quite a few years. And a lot of scientists have come to the point where there's like, okay, there isn't one. We haven't found an NCC, no neural correlate of consciousness. All we found is that if we cut out some parts, you're no longer conscious. Like, for instance, there is about a 2 or 3 millimeter size patch at the very core of your thalamus, which is the size of a walnut. If you cut it out, you got a brain dead person. It's called the interlaminar nuclei, and it holds together all the other nuclei of the thalamus. And if you cut that part out, you're as good as dead. That's the end. So anyway, so they thought, oh, well, this is the neural correlate of consciousness. But then when they looked into it, it's like, okay, that doesn't explain anything. So every NCC that they've come up with doesn't successfully give us that intuitive feel that we've explained consciousness. Okay. Now, I have done a lot of work to give myself the intuitive feel that I know what it means. I know what consciousness is. So I no longer have a hard problem. For me, it's pretty easy. So that's kind of what he's talking about. And he's kind of giving up on the idea that we're ever going to come up with a physical description that is going to satisfy our intuition. Of course, we're never going to be able to come up with a physical description that satisfies the intuition of the feeling of the sun on you when you're on the beach.
I wouldn't agree with that.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I guess I'm kind of with you, Jason. I think I
just
know enough about the sun on the beach.
I mean, I'm just saying that, like, to make a statement, like if this guy's making a statement that we're never going to be able to have that form of knowledge broken down scientifically into its bits and bytes of understanding all the physical aspects of the brain and how things like intuitions and feelings and like those aspects manifest themselves in the brain. I don't agree with that. I think that we will be able to. I think it's legitimate to say we don't understand that now, but I just don't. I just think this whole pontification around, like, we can't understand consciousness doesn't mean that it's not 100% based in the brain, and that we can't at some point in the future be able to deduce all the little facets of why that's happening. I just think that we will be able to do that. And
okay, and here's where you and I possibly disagree. I think we've already done that. We already know enough. We just haven't put it together in the proper intuitive package that people are understanding that we already know. We know more about the brain, I think, than most areas of science already.
I don't like using the word intuition in that respect, because it implies like a feeling. I have a feeling about how this works, which I don't think that that's what we're talking about. We're talking about the actual quantitative evidence biochemically on those topics.
Okay.
That's what I think.
Okay, let me tell you this. So sodium and chlorine, the atoms combined form something called table salt. And when table salt forms in water and the water slowly dries out, a crystal is formed, and it's a cubic crystal, right?
Yeah.
Okay. What I'm telling you is that the physical description gives you an intuitive grasp of what's happening. It's not a feeling, it's not woo, but it gives you an intuitive grasp. But you don't actually know what the reality of those things are, right? Not entirely. We know enough about it to get an intuitive grasp of how it works. So your pushback on the idea of intuition, I think, fails in that all of science, all that we understand about science, we have a good intuitive grasp. I have a good intuitive grasp of gravity and forces and all of that. Okay. That doesn't mean that I actually have an experience of the reality of a crystal forming or gravity or anything. It means that we know enough to say, oh, now I get it. I understand it. I don't need to know any more about it. You have explained it to me. So scientific explanation, I think, necessarily relies on our intuition.
Sure, if that's how you want to describe intuition, sure. I mean,
Yeah.
Because we know for a fact that the brain makes assumptions. Like we do this
Right.
every day. I mean, we could talk about it scientifically about like what is the likelihood of an outcome based on the evidence that we have, and we scientifically make a an assessment, whether it be statistically or through some other mechanism to say we have a certain level of confidence. Your brain does the same. Your brain does the same thing, like in its own organic environment. Like I see something, the brain's like I have to make an assessment of what that is, and like
Right.
Bigfoot. Like I see this thing in the woods, I'm like, oh, it looks like this. It must be the brain's like I got to make something out of that. I see a stump. It's cloudy. It looks like it's moving. It's an animal. And my adrenaline goes up, my fear goes up. It's like, that's an animal. My brain's filled in the gaps, Okay. I mean, but I think that we have some understanding of those mechanisms, and that to say we're never ever going to be able to understand how that stuff works. I don't think that's the case. I think that we will slowly start to understand all of those aspects.
Yeah, what we're doing here is we're unpacking various ideas of intuition. Some people see intuition as this bullshit, guesswork kind of, world kind of thing. I do not. I see intuition as one of the aspects of how the brain works, how it has to work for an organism to exist. If you hear a crackle in the woods and there's something charging the other way, you turn around and run. You have a damn good intuition. It's going to save your ass, right? But you don't know what it is. It could turn out to be Amazon delivering your latest book.
But people do make I'm sorry. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, that's the point I wanted to make.
Yeah. I was only going to say that like people use that term intuition to imply like some facet that is unexplainable. It's like, this isn't my brain, this is my mind and intuition. And that's like something like nebulous that we're never going to be able to understand. But the reality is that what you just described as intuition is actually very quantitative, can be quantitatively described, and it has a direct association with the biochemical processes in the brain.
Right. Yeah, and that's so that's a good intuition of intuition itself.
Sure. There you go. Yeah, of course. Yeah, we agree with that. Yeah.
Okay.
Not many people know that we live in the past, actually. We like 200 milliseconds, is it?
200 milliseconds in the past, yeah.
So we have to predict everything.
I guess I can quit working on my 200 millisecond time machine.
Yeah. Yeah, to extend that, what I want to tell people is that you don't live in the now, even if it's 200 milliseconds old. That 200 milliseconds is sloppy as hell. So over a period of 1 second, what you're experiencing, you're putting together. So subjective reality has a granularity to it that is pretty damn big. It's about 200 a fifth to a full second, and that's what your subjective experience is. Once you understand that about the brain, you start to get closer to an intuitive understanding of consciousness, because there's a hell of a lot that happens in 1 second that adds up to what we call qualia, or the qualic or qualitative aspect of an experience. And we can't call it all out. Okay, there's a couple of terms from set theory that I'm not sure how often they're used, but I really like them. And one is when you describe a set of things, like a set of numbers, you could describe it by extension. So you could say 1, a 3, a 5, a 7, all the way up to and a 9, right? Now there's another way to describe sets, and it's called intentional with an S. So intention with an S. Yeah. And that is to describe all odd numbers between 0 and 10. Okay, so that's an intentional set. So I apply that to consciousness, in that you have to consider that of all the things you're conscious of right now, you are not going to be able to sit down and extend that set rationally. That there's a whole lot of consciousness that's going on in your body that basically comes that's all hitting you at once, and it adds up to this qualitative feel. Okay, but if somebody asked you, what are you feeling, you'd say, oh, I feel a little chilly, I feel or I feel the wind, or whatever. You could list things by extension, but you can never describe the qualia or the subjective experience entirely by extension. That sort of thing. Hi, Gary. Hang on, I got a plumber. Plumber friend.
Okay, so wow. Yeah. I think you clarified that, Leophilius, although I will never remember the distinction.
Tension, yeah. Not intention. Yeah.
So what have you been working on, Mr. Torn? Or excuse me, I'm sorry, Dr. Torn.
What am I working on? I'm working on a supplemental to a paper on population synthesis. So it's trying to essentially downscale data that is sparsely represented at a large scale, and then scale it down to a small scale. So if I have a bunch of data collected at a large regional area, I want to be able to get an accurate representation of that data at a finer spatial scale. So I'm trying to I'm working on some stuff with that.
How much processor time does that pull on your computer? Nothing?
No, not a whole lot. It's not computationally intensive. It's more just mathematically complex. If you're doing it across like very large multi-dimensional arrays, then it is somewhat complex. But I'm not using that level of data. I'm just trying to get it to work. So
I missed that.
Are you preparing a paper or?
Yeah. I did all the work on it, and now I'm like trying to get the supplemental materials together for that. So that's typically, you have to submit all your code and how everything runs. So I've got most of the paper done, but now I'm just trying to get all the figures and supplemental shit all structured correctly.
What language do you code in?
Mostly Python.
Oh, really? Python. Okay. You probably teach me a trick or two.
Most of the statistical derivations I do in R, just because if it's just pure like empirical calculations or statistical, then R is a little bit more a little easier, and the outputs it generates are nicer. So
yeah. I did a whole bunch of stuff for Thomson Reuters in Python, and I ended up using Ruby as a companion to some of that stuff. But what we were tracking is the errors that you get in the system. So we were, oh God, it's been 2 years. We had this like massive, like I used to get 500,000 errors a day, and I had to do statistics on what kind of errors they were. And we were starting to get to the point where we were going to create an AI that could tell you the health of the servers based on aberrations in the air patterns, because errors were just constant, so they were like the noise and background and stuff. That's how I got introduced to Python. But I'm gonna publish some Python code, and people are gonna hate it because it is the horrible, it's the yuckiest code I think I've ever written, but it works. And I need another 6 months to take it to the point where I'm proud of it, right? And I'm not proud of it yet, but anyway, Python's pretty cool. Python's powerful as hell.
It's very scalable.
Yeah, the packages. I am running into, it's taking me 8 hours to run a batch. I'm working with RNA worlds, and it's taking me 8 hours to run a really good 1,000 cycle batch, basically, or 10,000 cycle batch.
I always have to tell people not to, like, if you're dealing with like I always have lots of people come to me and are like, oh, this is taking days or weeks to run, and they're like using loops, and I'm like, don't use a loop. What are you doing? This is going to take forever. Like, vectorize it. And so vectorize and parallelize,
getting my mind around how to parallelize this particular algorithm would probably take me longer than it takes to run the batches. So
that's that's always that, as an experienced programmer, you're always like gauging, like,
right,
how long is it going to take me to do this the very efficient way, or just the way that gets it done, and sometimes it's better just to do it the way you've done. Just you just want to get it done. Yeah. You don't want to have to spend like a couple weeks trying to figure out how to do something the most efficient way. So right.
So somebody described a good programmer as somebody who will get a task, of writing, like creating a list and messing with it. And that task would take them an hour to do if they were to sit down with a pencil and do it. But they will spend 2 days or entire weekend writing a program to do it for them.
No, and that's, I don't know if that's a good programmer or not. I mean,
it depends on how often you're going to have to do that task in the future.
Yeah, well, you always imagine, I'm going to have to do this again. But I mean, it's just brutal to sit down and do something that's boring and rote when you can write an algorithm to do it for you. So I'd prefer to write the algorithm stuff.
Anyway. But I don't know how many times I've like done stuff and then done it again, and then done it again, and then done it again. Where I'm like, I know I've written code that does this.
Right.
But I can't find it.
And
I just have to redo it, It's like the most annoying thing sometimes.
Yep. I have a stack of hard disks that someday I'm going to go through, like maybe when I'm 95, and find all the code I've written.
Do you still have any leftover floppy disks that you used for like a coaster?
I do have leftover floppy. In fact, I had the alpha version of Windows 1.0 on an 8-inch floppy disk. I put it in the computer and I can't read it anymore. I managed to find a 8-inch reader, 8-inch drive. You guys probably, Jason, you probably don't even know. Never heard of an 8-inch drive, right?
I mean, I've heard of them, but I don't know if I've ever seen an 8-inch drive. So
yeah, they were wonderful devices. There was a company called Persi that did an 8-inch drive, and they had an optical sensor to find the tracks. And it was a bunch of op amps in this really neat little circuit, and they had mirrors on it. And the mirrors had etchings on them to tell them exactly where the tracks were. And so it would go down and it would position to a particular spot on the 8-inch disk, and you could store 2 megabytes on one 8-inch disk. And it was big enough to fit you could use it as a dinner plate, this 8-inch disk, right? And anyway, so 3M, a big company here in St. Paul, you may have heard of it. They make tape. They had a fire and on their loading dock, and they had a $1,000 computer or no, a $10,000 microcomputer by IMSI, and it had these 8-inch floppies on it, right? And it had that optical disc, and it so happened that I knew how the disc worked. And they sold it to me for $1,000, which I thought was a steal, right? 8085 processor, $1,000. And I run home and got my Windex out and cleaned that little mirror, and it worked fine. Yeah. and I knew it, so I saved $9,000 on a computer. But
funny.
Just show you how damn old I am. 2 megahertz 8085 megahertz. Fuck this gigahertz stuff. I don't know why you kids today need gigahertz.
Yeah, if you need that many hertz, you're just not trying hard.
Right, you're not trying hard enough. Yeah. Anyway. Anyway, my project is to develop an intuitive understanding of consciousness given the neuroscience that we already have. And I keep saying that we have enough of the neuroscience. What we don't have is the proper intuitions yet. We don't have the proper inter-theoretic framework to convert it from subjective experience to the actual neuroscience. And over a period of about, I think, 10 years, I have come to a complete intuitive feel for what my brain is doing and what consciousness is. And I keep trying to give that away to people and failing. Failing. Anyway. So what's up? What else we got to do, Scott? We got anything else on the radar?
Well, I did want to recommend this one video. Where did I put it? Oh, you've got the link. It's that Scientist versus Scientist. Is Evolution Real?
Yeah.
Where this young fella named Forrest Valkai, he's a science communicator. He has about 63,000 subs. He does a really awesome job of just taking down this video by Kevin Anderson, who is a creationist, who says that bacteria that become resistant to antibiotics is not an example of evolution. So anyway, it's a really good takedown. He's a really smart guy, and I just recommend people watching it. I just watched it this afternoon.
Yeah, and so we looked into Kevin Anderson a little bit and found out that he is the director of the Creation Research Institute. And yeah, and they talk about a paper, right? So that was one of them, right? Am I right, Scott?
I'm muted. What? What were you asking?
Kevin Anderson, basically, remember we found out he's the director of this Creation Research Society.
Yeah. And he's also the editor of the paper that he published in. So
right. And if you go here and you look at it about CRS and you go to the board of directors, you can find a picture of a whole bunch of these devils. So this is a nice list of people to watch out for. One of them is Jeff Tompkins. I know him. Jerry Bergman I've heard of. Who else have we heard of here?
Robert Carter.
Robert Carter for sure. Oh my God. There's a whole lot of stink there. God, I just recently heard a creationist say that something about humans are not found in the fossil record because they didn't live at the bottom of the sea. Have you ever heard anything like that?
Repeat that.
Humans are not in the fossil record with dinosaurs because humans didn't live at the bottom of the sea.
Yeah, and all dinosaurs did.
Yeah.
We have Gutsick Gibbon in the side chat.
Hey, Erica.
I was going to tell Erica that I liked her discussion around climate and orbital cycles and effects on our atmospheric systems. I thought that was really well done. So
That was a great video.
Yeah.
Bite-sized busts.
Although I didn't watch it enough. I watched almost all of it, but I didn't know if she talked about like Milankovitch cycles or any of those aspects. That would be interesting to talk more about, like the cycles of the orbit of the Earth, how that changes over like 25,000 or so years. But anyways, whatever. Yeah, go ahead. I'm sorry.
What is up with the moon moving out? Basically, they claim that the moon should have like been a lot further away than it is, or something. Or if the Earth were billions of years old, the rate that the moon is like
it's getting further away from the Earth,
right?
And so it started out closer. It's getting further away. Therefore, we should already have no moon or something.
Yeah.
I know that I actually read a couple papers on this. And the reason I did was because I actually was watching Kent Hovind talk about this shit, which he's completely wrong. He has like kind of a linear perspective on the rate of increase of the moon moving away from us, which is wrong. That's not the case whatsoever. There's lots of papers that identify it's not a linear. It's not linear in terms of its movement away from the Earth. But yeah, I mean, there's lots of research on this particular topic. It's not a mystery. Lots of people have studied this aspect, studied the effects of the, like modeled out like the movement of the moon away from the Earth, and it aligns really well with our expectations on the moon's creation. So it's
okay.
It's well established science.
Yeah, they're so sure of themselves when they talk about this. I think SFT and his crew have even talked about it. So,
I mean, I guess they're trying to make the argument that the rate of increase, or that the rate of increase, if held constant, would imply that the Earth is younger than what it is, because otherwise the moon would have crashed into the Earth if you went backwards, like under that linear progression.
Yep.
That's what you're saying, right?
Yeah.
Well, don't they think that we got the moon from a collision between another body and the Earth, and that like part of the Earth crust is actually on the moon? Part of the moon.
I think that's the best guess right now.
Yeah.
I thought I've seen Kent Hovind talk about this, where they have some wacky theory of like, I forget what it was. Leo talked about it too. It's like some theory of how the moon formed that is really, really crazy. I can't remember. It's like some like, what's it called? Oh shit! It's like.
Well, I have a forum that talks about it many different ways that it could have happened.
Is that what you posted?
There's a video, that shows multiple ways that it could have happened.
That's interesting. Sounds interesting.
Yep. Well,
so far it has one video in the forum, but
so I take it we're gonna have people jump in if they want to.
Yeah, should I play the intermission first before?
Yeah, let's play the intermission, and anybody who wants to hop in and chit chat with us, let's do that.
Okay.
Well, I got.
There you go.
Headbanging music.
That is a convenience for people that just want to stop listening at a certain point. So anyway, so that you can just when you see that pop up, please look away. Look away. Anyway, Leo. Hey, Leo.
Oh, hey, how's it going? Yeah, I was just gonna say, to Jason, I explained that whole thing in my debate with Kent. Actually, it's called the Theia collision hypothesis.
Yeah.
I actually put that in the chat instead of highlighting the comment. You highlighted the one that was directly above it. So yeah, I figured I should come in and directly tell Jason. That's what and the thing is with it, it will probably never ascend to anything greater than a hypothesis because there isn't really any way to provide a high enough degree of confidence in terms of determining that is what happened. But with everything that we know about, planetary formation and, the protoplanetary disks around stars and things like that, and also given just the way that the Earth-Moon system is structured, certainly the most plausible explanation for the Earth-Moon system is that the Earth struck a Mars, or was struck by a Mars-sized object, probably about 4 billion years ago. A couple 100 million years after it formed, if that.
But there was like another. I mean, what I was thinking was not the formal hypothesis, but the idea that the like Hovind's folks think of. I think it's maybe like, why are there craters on the moon? And that their argument is it has something to do with like the water splashing up or something.
Yeah, that's the lunar bukkake thing from Nephilim Free. That the floodwaters when they burst forth were so great that they shot holes. They literally shot craters in the moon, which anybody that understands anything about launching rockets knows that no, like we could grant that there's somehow a way to get water powerful enough to do that. It's still not gonna do that because that's just not the way it works when you shoot things off the Earth.
So Leo, did you link something in chat?
I did. I was surprised that you guys weren't covering it. Philip Goff, who is a philosopher of mind and a panpsychist, I actually really like him a lot, had Sean Carroll on. I think he had another co-host. I can't remember the guy's name. I want to say Kevin something. I think it started with a K. Don't quote me on Kevin. But they were talking about the title of it is Consciousness Emergent?
I can't find it.
It's Keith Frankish. That was the other. I can link it.
Yeah, through in private.
And yeah, it's a little over 3 hours long, but it's a really good discussion. And I have to be honest, Sean Carroll was a little bit more aggressive in this discussion. I don't mean in a bad way, but was a little bit more aggressive in this discussion. But I do know that him and Philip Goff have had discussions before. I don't know if they're public or not, but I know that they mentioned that this is something they have talked about with each other before. So,
well, it's in my watch later playlist. So I'm gonna later on when I'm probably eating supper or something, gonna watch it.
Yeah, where I have it paused right now, Sean has a very, very disconcerting look on his face. I don't know why I'm going to play it if it's on mute. Okay. Got really quiet.
You want to share your screen?
I can, yeah.
Oh, that's because I was muted. I think emergence is a little weak.
I guess I don't know what you mean.
By being weak.
Yeah, when you say emergence is weak, are you referring to the concept of weak emergence?
No, I'm referring to the concept of emergence of the mind in general. I'm saying that basically the physicality of the mind is identical to the mind. Nothing has to emerge. Emergence is sort of one of those intuitions we have where something emerges that is greater than the sum of its parts, that sort of thing. I'm saying
I don't think it's
parts are all there is.
I don't think it's necessarily that it's greater than the sum of its parts more than it is that what it is consists in the sum of its parts. Like a puzzle. If you get a puzzle that shows a picture of a red barn, I can't take one of the puzzle pieces or even a handful of them and get a picture of a red barn.
I think
that image emerges from the way that those individual pieces are put together as a pattern between them. And that's, I would say that is largely, it seems to be what the mind is.
I think I'm pushing back on strong emergence, which is kind of the idea that there's something entirely different that pops up, that sort of thing. I don't think we should think about our minds and ourselves in any other terms than physical.
I mean, I agree.
Yeah,
I think they're physical. I think they're physical. I think the mind is a physical thing. I would say the mind relates to the brain the same way horsepower relates to an internal combustion engine. The horsepower isn't like an object or a thing, and I don't think it's the same with the mind either. The mind is not an object or a thing. It's more a label, a name that we can put to some end result of a set of processes, functions, interactions, and their relata. And that's exactly what the mind is with respect to the brain.
Yeah. So I got a feeling that Wildheart is going to be doing a video on me and calling me all kinds of names because I just threw him out of the studio.
Okay.
By the way,
where do you want me to play from where it's at now? Do you want me to start this over? What?
Whatever you think, Leo.
Think there's a big.
Hold on, I don't think I clicked share audio. Wait, hold on.
No, it's
issue. I think it's more terminological, but I describe my position as illusionist because I say that you might call it eliminativist. I think there's a certain concept of consciousness that we need to get rid of. That isn't a sort of useful higher level pattern emergent feature that is just like, the vital spirit or phlogiston or something that's just a misconceived notion that's not helping anybody. And we need to get rid of it from science and philosophy. And the interesting question is a psychological question of how we come up with this concept and why it seems so compelling. And now the concept of consciousness that I want to get rid of is basically the one that Phillips has. The one that it seems natural to talk about as something that poses a hard problem that can only be explained as something fundamental and so on. That's got sort of no structure to it. That doesn't have any, that you can't break down into component abilities of any kind. That's just this pure feel that's just resistant to any kind of analysis or understanding, and that theory can't get any grip on. I want to get rid of that because I think it's just doing no good at all. And that's one reason. Another reason I want to get rid of it is that we already have features in our everyday ontology that can do all the work. So we have features like colors and sounds and shapes and smells and things understood as features of the world around us. So things have colors, and smells and sounds. And my body has various feelings and pains and so on. They're okay. They're nice emergent features in the weak sense that we can talk about. What we don't need are then mental versions of those things, the qualia, which are somehow produced by the worldly versions in our minds, and which we then react to in some internal theater of, the Cartesian theater that Dennett talks. So as soon as you introduce this way of thinking, you have.
Isn't that what you were essentially just saying, Speed?
Right. I like this guy. I really like this guy. Yeah.
To have two kinds of colors, the worldly ones on the thing.
So does this mean I hate Sean Carroll?
Let's have the worldly ones.
What's that?
Does this mean Speed's going to hate Sean Carroll in a moment?
No, I don't think so. Keith and Sean were more on the same page here than either of the two were with Philip.
Okay, so Philip was
both Sean and Keith are not fans of panpsychism.
Oh, so Philip Goth is a panpsychist?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
There's dispositional properties of surfaces, dispositions to affect us in certain ways, and just get rid of the mental ones. We don't need them. They're not explaining anything. They're not taking us anywhere. They're bad theoretical posits. Now, so in that sense, I'm an eliminativist or an illusionist about consciousness in that sense, not a poetic naturalist or emergentist, but I'm happy to say that consciousness, there's a difference between being conscious of things and
I thought somebody, I don't know if it was Digital Gnosis or not, but I thought somebody in the chat who apparently frequents the channel frequently said that Keith holds to us, I think something like an eliminativist view that like Dennett has or something. I don't know anything about Dennett, so I don't really know whether that's true or not.
Really
but
he's not an eliminativist. Churchlands are. Dennett is a little bit. He kind of he's probably more like I am, an eliminativist. The Churchlands want to get rid of all talk about mind. They sort of go overboard, and they don't make any friends by doing it. But anyway,
they're perceiving them non-consciously and so on. There's some difference, and it's really interesting to find out what it is. And I'm happy to be a poetic naturalist about that. So, Sean, can I persuade you to be an illusionist in my sense, at least?
Well,
please.
No. So I don't feel strongly about this. So maybe like on alternate days of the week, I might go along with you. But I do think it's mostly a semantic distinction, not a deep philosophical one. In some sense, my concern would be is that you're almost granting too much rhetorical ground to the...
I do have to say, one of the most beautiful things that I like about this conversation is that a guy with a PhD in theoretical astrophysics, and he does astrophysics, theoretical physics, cosmology, isn't somebody you would typically take as, philosophically interested, is here having a discussion with two philosophers.
Yeah, that's good.
I think it's one of the reasons why I think Sean is probably my favorite science communicator out there, and it's certainly my biggest influence when it comes to physics, is because he's not afraid to get his hands into the philosophy either, and he tries to incorporate what can we learn empirically about the physical world, and then what are the best ways to think about the physical world and how we can understand it empirically. So, and this is why I like both physics and philosophy. I think specifically physics tied with philosophy, there's just something about it that it gives you a really good framework for approaching the world. And I think a lot of that does have to do with because you're coming from a perspective of physics, and physics is really digging down into what the world is. But you also sprinkle in that philosophy and ensuring that you're thinking about those things in the right way. And I definitely see that Sean really tries to do that, where to take what physics is saying, but also make sure that he's thinking about that in the right ways and incorporating that consistently with a much broader worldview.
Yeah.
Non-physicalists here by saying that consciousness is an illusion. What do you mean? I think you correctly clearly articulated it, but is this specifically mental aspect that is not explicable in terms of physical stuff doing things, whereas I would be tempted to say no, consciousness is not an illusion. It's clearly there, but it is completely understandable in terms of physical stuff doing things. So I do agree that there is something that should be eliminated, or something that there is an illusion that is an illusion. But I guess I don't think it's helpful to label that thing consciousness, because I think that consciousness is just a higher level emergent thing.
I tend to say that what I think is illusory, qualia. These supposed mental versions of worldly properties. Colors are real, mental colors are not. And
see, that's what I agree with. This idea that it's almost like, and maybe I would be misrepresenting what Keith is saying here, but it seems almost like he's saying something along the lines of there isn't really a difference between a brain state and a mental state, that there's just the state of the brain, and to try to delineate these into two separate categories of brain states and mental states of, well, a color as it is in the world, and then your perception of that color as being categorically different is a misstep in trying to understand what consciousness is. That's what I'm interpreting it as. I don't know if anybody else is getting that, or if I might be misrepresenting what it is he's trying to say.
No, I think it's what he's I don't like the word of calling consciousness illusion. Doesn't work, because illusion is a cognitive apparatus that happens within consciousness. It's just one of the many things that we're conscious of, is like we make mistakes. Like my favorite illusion is the black squirrel. Basically, I walked outside, I looked at a tree, and I saw a crow, in a tree, like right where the branch joins the tree. Then all of a sudden, the black thing started circling around the tree, and I realized it was a black squirrel. That whole thing took about a half a second. So I had a illusion of a crow for a half a second, which was replaced with the eidetic black squirrel zipping around a tree. And of course, I had it right. So I don't like calling consciousness an illusion, because illusion is just something we humans use to illustrate that we made a mistake, that sort of thing. It has nothing to do with it. And then he pushes back a little too heavily on qualia, because I think qualia is the sum total of what we're feeling. Like right now, even though I'm looking at your picture, Leo, I'm still feeling my shoulder feeling just a little bit out of sorts. And I'm feeling my cat at the same time. All of these things sum together. Our experience of the world is a summation of a multi-sensory mess all at once. And so when we see the color red, at the same time we see the color red, we may be feeling, we may be having a memory of blood or stop signs or, slam on the brakes, and along with this constant input of the color red coming from this cup I have here. So all of that together has a qualitative aspect to it. Okay. And that's why we have such a rich sense of consciousness, because we have a lot of sensory input coming in all at once. And the other interesting thing is that when you think about this, what you want to think of is when you think what I am experiencing, I am not a little point out there somewhere. I am actually a piece of the universe moving through the universe, right? And all that I'm experiencing is the physical description of that piece of the universe, an organism, complicated little organism. So anyway.
One reason I do like to say that, I think it's useful to say this, is because there is a really interesting psychological problem here, that which is that why we think there's a hard problem. And I can understand where Philip's coming from. I concentrate on the redness of the red, and I think that's something kind of primitive and real, and it's just there, presented somehow to me. And of course, it might not actually be there in the world. It might be an hallucination or a dream or something or whatever, but it's there, and there's this redness, and it's undeniable, and it's a brute fact. And that, I don't trust that intuition. I know, and the zombie might be able to do all the sensitivity to the worldly colors and the reactions and so on without having that immediate presence of the redness to it. I can see that intuition. I can feel it. And that to me is a very interesting psychological fact. Really interesting psychological fact about the nature of introspection, about the nature of the access we have to whatever's happening inside our brains. It's really interesting. And the way that our brains are tracking and reacting to the world and latching on to salient features of the world, and the way these features are pushing at us and affecting us. And I think that our talk about what it's like is very much about our interaction with the world, about how the world is impacting on us. And I think that's really interesting. And that's why I think it's useful to talk about illusion, because there's something real and potent and powerful that people like Philip are gesturing at, and they're right that it matters hugely. But their conception of it is misguided. And in that sense, it's an illusion. They're mistaking the complex stage machinery of the brain for the simple levitation effect or something. And that's why I stick by the illusion idea, because it encourages us to ask what's behind it, what's the trickery behind it.
Yeah, no, I think that there are important things going on here. And again, I will demur that this is not my expertise, but it is very much in line with the.
I should probably pause it there. I don't know if anybody's got any thoughts on what Keith was saying.
It's Consciousness Emergent. Well, I just got here, but I do. Would you mind linking it in the side or DM it on Twitter or something? Because it's in Consciousness Emergent. Well, I mean, why wouldn't it be, Jason?
What's up? How's it going, Midnight?
So I linked this in the description, Midnight. So.
Well.
And nobody ever looks at my description.
That I mentioned that there's a lot to be understood here philosophically. So in that, I'm completely in agreement with you. So let me shift the ground to physics things that I understand better, because I do think there are analogies there that maybe will clarify, or you can tell me whether they will just muddy the waters. But when we do understand the world better and better in physics terms, sometimes there are ideas that we thought were useful and we realize, no, they're just not there at all, right? Like phlogiston or caloric or whatever, right? Plum-pudding model of the atom, the geocentric model of the solar system, they were just wrong, okay? So one way which science can progress is to say, nope, that was wrong, this one is right. But there's another way that science can progress, which is to say that, oh, this thing that we thought was there is only a useful concept in a much narrower domain of physical situations than we thought it was, right? Newtonian absolute space and time is not there in relativity. If we frequently hopped into spaceships and zoomed off near the speed of light, that would be a very, very bad idea to keep in the back of our minds. But that doesn't stop us from synchronizing our watches, right, in our everyday lives. Or even, Aristotle's idea that in order to keep something moving, you have to keep pushing it. In our everyday lives, that works really, really well. It was not an illusion, even though we later realized there's something called the law of conservation of momentum. So I don't know exactly where to come down on these psychological issues, like whether or not they will be simply replaced or made more nuanced, or realize in what domain they serve a useful purpose. I'm open to all of those. And I think they're important questions to address.
It depends on how it breaks down, to what extent this, what I'm calling an illusion, is due to hardwired features of introspection, to what extent it's due to bad theorizing about the deliverances of introspection. There are all sorts of different possibilities here, multiple factors. You can always hang on to a term by revising the concept, by revising it sufficiently much. And I'm happy to retain the concept consciousness properly revised. The danger, though, is one reason I like to talk about illusion is to shock people a little bit into how much of a revision is going to be necessary. Daniel Dennett wrote this wonderful book, Consciousness Explained, wonderful book, which I think did more than any other book in the last 50 years to explain consciousness. But people say, oh, you'll explain consciousness away, you're ignoring consciousness. Because, of course, they conceptualize it differently. And so they're not prepared to do the revision. And now I'm trying to say, yeah, you're gonna have to recognize that you really are going to have to revise your concept of consciousness quite a bit here. It's a different perspective.
The Dennis book, Consciousness Explained, they call it, facetiously, they call it Consciousness Explained Away. Dennett does a really good job of explaining that most of the way that we approach mind and consciousness ends up being dualist at its very heart, and that we keep thinking of a homunculus, and he keeps trying to dispense with the errors of the homunculus. And I think I read the book twice. I need to read it a third time, because he makes a very interesting case for how you get rid of this this inherent dualism in our thinking, that we think in a dualistic way just naturally. And Dennett does a really good job of ripping that to pieces, and he has not gotten. People should have stood up and applauded, and instead he gets a lot of criticism over this book. But anyway, go ahead.
Perspective, you're going to have to climb up a different hill and look at the landscape from a different position. So it's not going to be, because otherwise people will just say, well, you're not explaining consciousness. I'm not explaining consciousness in your sense. I'm saying in that sense it's illusory. I'm asking you to reconceptualize what consciousness is. And so I like the kind of confrontational aspect of it a bit, because the revision is going to be pretty substantial. And of course, once you've got people to do that, then we can keep the old terms if we want. But it's like, reconceptualizing the stars as, pinpricks in the vault of heaven or whatever, and reconceptualizing them as, nuclear fireballs that are, thousands of light years away. It's a big one.
No, I completely agree, and I get it, and I'm glad that I got that little intro to it from you, because I knew a little bit about it, but you're putting in terms I can very much understand and sympathize with. Again, to put a physicsy analogy into the pot, I just wrote my last book was on the many worlds interpretation of quantum mechanics, and part of that is there's whole controversies about all these worlds, et cetera, et cetera. But the more, to me, the deeper thing is the idea that the way we describe the world at the fundamental level, even below the core theory, is as some vector in a giant dimensional vector space. And everything that we think exists, space, planets, particles, electrons, and so forth, is just a convenient way of talking about the dynamics of this vector, okay? And so even things like location in space just aren't fundamental in any sense. And I think that even professional physicists and even people who do quantum gravity for a living, who are, supposed to be the most super advanced in thinking about the emergent level of space-time, they still grant space way too much tangibility than they honestly should. They haven't quite internalized yet that it's completely an emergent phenomenon. So maybe that's an analogy to how we think about qualia or something like that.
We undoubtedly have brains that were not designed to do these things.
Oh, no.
They were designed to conceptualize the everyday world of sort of Aristotelian sort of world, and similarly for introspection. Our brains weren't designed to. Introspection, I think, is probably fairly late, and may even in its more elaborate forms may be language dependent. And our brains weren't designed to conceptualize conceptualize their own activity. Except they're probably designed to do a bit of public relations, and that's all.
Yeah,
I mean, you want to halt it here, Leo?
Again, maybe none of us here.
Yeah, we can watch. I'm going to watch the whole thing afterwards. So, anyway.
So, does this Goff guy ever say anything?
Yeah, but before, if we go back to when I started playing it, before that, Keith had said that he wanted to talk to Sean, just one-on-one for a few minutes about something, and that's what this was. That's largely what we were watching.
Oh, okay,
there.
Gotcha.
Yeah,
but yeah, that was just I'm still baffled at the fact that a theoretical physicist could sit down with two fucking philosophers and philosophize with them. When you think of a physicist, that's the last thing you think of them doing, is sitting down with philosophers talking about the mind. But again, that's the reason that I really like Sean Carroll.
Yep.
And they didn't spend the whole 3 hours trying to assign labels to one another, for one thing.
Exactly.
That's helpful.
Nice. Ready to shoot in the head? Or
is the gun loaded? I don't know.
Do you guys want to discuss that? Gun is loaded. Ready to shoot in the head. Yeah, Thursday nights are busy for me. So
what do you got going on?
Meetings, like head meetings for my head. Yeah.
I've actually been doing a little bit of reading on Carlo Rovelli's relational quantum mechanics.
Ooh,
because it's a quantum foundation, like MWI, Everettian Foundation, Copenhagen Foundation, and the best way to describe it, like quickly and simplistically, is it's taking the best of both worlds in terms of the Copenhagen interpretation and the many worlds interpretation. It's what exists in between going fully to the many worlds, but you're not quite at Copenhagen. It's in between the two of those.
Well, you've got Jay's attention.
I'm going to link that in the description. The Stanford Encyclopedia of Philosophy has an article on relational quantum mechanics.
Yes, I read that. That's pretty good.
I think they mentioned Ravelli in here somewhere.
Did you just Google relational quantum mechanics?
And Ravelli, I think.
Okay. Do you have an arxiv.org link that says it's got some numbers and then says the relational interpretation of quantum physics?
What is it now?
There should be a bunch of numbers starting with 2109, and then the relational interpretation of quantum physics. Click on that, and then click to download the PDF. That is a paper he wrote on it from September of this year, and I also read this, and this is this isn't like super technical. There's not like a lot of math, but it's a little bit more technical with some of the like philosophical language and some of the physics language in it, but it's nothing. I mean, anybody that's got even a very basic familiarity with physics and philosophy would be able to understand it.
Okay.
And it's not a super long read either, but that and the SCP article are both really good. But he does have a book, Helgoland, which I really want.
One is called Reality Is Not What It Seems. And the other one is Helgoland. So
What is that?
Helgoland's the
Quantum
one he wrote
mechanics?
last year.
Is that the one that proves the Christian God?
What?
Well, apparently, according to Jay, we're supposed to remind you that quantum mechanics proves the Christian God. So,
No, it doesn't.
apparently, there's something
Quantum
out
mechanics
there.
doesn't prove anything supernatural. In fact, quantum mechanics largely gives us even further reasons to think that supernatural things don't exist.
I'm just going to ask people to Google Carlo Rovelli. So cool. Awesome.
Very awesome.
I've been reading about actin and cell membranes and a couple other things. I've been reading a little bit of Kunin's book, the one that the creationists love to pick that one quote from, where he says abio is a failure.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
I have a feeling that's not actually what he was saying.
No, there's a lot of context to it. He's basically saying that it's a field, a very new field that we really need to know a lot more about, I think is what he's saying. Also, at the end of that book, he says intelligent design is malicious nonsense.
Yeah.
I don't know why they don't pick that quote.
Somebody's dog is whining.
Yeah, that's mine. She's upset that I'm not sitting on the couch and while she sleeps on the chair. So
here's the intermittent midnight sparkle. The intermittent. Yeah. Should we go? Should we shoot her in the head and go backstage and yell at midnight for a while?
Yes.
We probably should, so I can go get some food.
No, you're not going anywhere.
Yes, I am.
Shooting her in the head.
Going to get food.
We're shooting her in the head, guys. Okay. Thanks everybody out in chat for showing up today. Love y'all. And here we go. Goodbye, cool world.